Alrighty, welcome back to another special Monday edition of the Wisco Fanatics Show. I'm really excited. I have former Marquette Golden Eagle John Willkom. I found out about John, actually. I didn't know this, that he was at Marquette right after my personal favorite player, Dwayne Wade. But I found John by listening to his book, Walk On Warrior, that I really enjoyed. And I'll be honest, I didn't want it to end. The book ended, and I was like, oh, no, I wanted it to keep going. But I got a handful of questions for you. Really excited to hear some of your answers and also get some of your insight on some of these questions, because there's a lot of, frankly, in fandom, there's a lot of couch talk where people,
Absolutely.
I don't think, really realize quite how hard it is to be a professional athlete and a collegiate athlete at that. So just first off, like what is collegiate conditioning like?
It's insane for probably 99.9% of, the world. I think, you know, I'm sure you played sports. Most people listening to this played sports,
Mhm.
likely in high school, some in college. Um, but even like I played multiple sports in high school, trained hard, then went and played Division II basketball on a scholarship in Minnesota. And even the level of conditioning from Division II to Division I. And granted, I'm just looking at my experience
Mhm.
personally. But when you have a strength coach with even assistant strength coaches below them, and let's say you've got 4 to 6 guys from a team in there with like 6 coaches, these people are going to ride you to get the absolute most out of every ounce of energy that you have. Um, and it can be brutal at times. I mean, mentally, physically, because they want to just get you to quit and basically tap out.
Mhm.
And so, I think going through that, obviously, it toughens you up quickly. It's amazing how much stronger you actually get, though, because it's like I think all of us would just have benchmarks in our mind of like, I can leg press 500 pounds maybe 5 times. And all of a sudden, when they're like, no, you're gonna sit here until you get 20, you really have some stuff going on in your head of like, how am I gonna do this? I'm 160 pounds. Um, but you kind of just do. And it's crazy. Then you walk out of the building and you go to class like everybody else, and people look at you like, why are you kind of wobbling around? And it's like I don't even know what to say, because if I told you what actually just happened 20 minutes ago, you probably wouldn't believe me anyway.
It's funny, like I remember like listening to the book and hearing you like walk in and like the strength and conditioning coach is like telling you guys that like you guys are gonna puke today.
Yeah, we had several experiences like that, and I would like to say it gets easier, but I actually think the job of a strength coach is to take you at your probably best and make you better. So
Mm,
even though you kind of get used to it, I mean, and I don't blame him or his staff for this.
mm.
They're thinking, okay, John's in phenomenal shape now. How do we take him at his peak and get him to another level? And so those guys find ways to press buttons. They know what your, maybe weaknesses are in terms of certain lifts or certain cardio things. And so, I mean, looking back on that as an adult, I say, hey, it probably wasn't the worst way to do it.
Mm.
But at the same time, it's like so many of us, okay, you have a job, you're coaching, whatever. Eventually it gets a little easier. It's just you kind of know what to expect versus there. You walk in the door and it's like, what, wait, what? We're doing what? Um, so there was a lot of that, constantly kept you on your toes, but in some ways, that's the way a lot of college sports are, professional sports are, is things are going to happen. You just kind of got to figure it out and deal with it.
So I know it's a lot different now than when you were transferring, but how do you feel about today's transfer rules given your situation of transferring and having to wait a year to play?
I think it's good actually. Basketball, college sports in general, it's a business. No matter how we want to cut it up, I'm not a big Jim Harbaugh fan, but I agree with what he says about revenue sharing and the players really are the product. And when you're bringing in that much money, coaches, can change and just move around and kind of with their free will. Players should be able to do the same. And I think, especially with the incredible competitiveness to go pro, if you can find a better situation or, there's a program that's going to feature you more or just put you in a better position to maybe have a professional career. I really can't doubt you for that one bit.
So, in your experience and just hearing from you, Tom Crane ride you a little bit harder because he knew you were ineligible to play games.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily Coach Crean, but I think it was more just the fact that because I couldn't suit up, again, like the team would come in, let's say on a Friday, and they
Hmm.
got a big game on Saturday. That strength and conditioning session is soft. It's easy. It's more of a, let's just make sure you're ready to go for tomorrow. Versus, I'm just getting my ass kicked on Friday, and then even on game day, I would, in a lot of cases, have to go in at 6 a.m. and have these sessions. And it's you're training almost like it's the off season. And so I think we'll talk about this in a minute, but even in professional sports, and I
Hmm.
worked for the Milwaukee Bucks for a bit, so many people don't understand like how much these guys do, even on the day of the game, between shoot around and lifts and stretches. And some of these people are at it for like 6 to 8 hours before the actual ball is tipped. And so it really is an incredible amount of like physical activity than to say, okay, now you got to go and play and win a game. Um, Sometimes it's probably even too much, to be honest.
Scary Alvarez on the Twitter side says hi. Scary's he's a big Badger guy. I like having him on. We do Badger stuff. Get funny to
Awesome.
get him. I'm interviewing a Marquette guy. Um, so this can go for your playing, coaching career in general, but how important do you feel culture is to a team, and like what do you feel that fan involvement factors into that culture?
I think the head coach sets the stage. So, I mean, if we're talking Marquette, Shaka's done a phenomenal job.
Mm,
I think, Fickle's trying to figure that out for Badger football.
mm,
Um, you could argue that, looking at tweets last night about just what LaFleur has done in Green Bay, and just you put a quarterback in that system, and obviously we can say that now. Probably 10, 12 weeks ago, we wouldn't have said that. But I think it starts with the head coach and just what they preach, what the demands are, and kind of what that program is going to be known for. And then you'd hope that the fans kind of surround themselves and want to be a part of that. And so I think when there's a lot of enthusiasm with a fan base, I mean, that's what makes Lambeau and just Green Bay such an amazing place to be. And granted, you and I are from Wisconsin, and people in Buffalo would probably say the same thing,
true.
or wherever. But I feel like there's a lot less, fair weather fans just in the state. People are passionate about their sports. Maybe it's because it's -8 outside right now. Um, but I think those are all good things, and I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of blue collar people in the state of Wisconsin, and I think we all appreciate hardworking teams just kind of roll up their sleeves, and they make the right plays, and they make the tackles, and you make the shots you're supposed to make. And so I don't know. I think it's a fun thing when the Brewers, the Bucks, Badgers, Marquette, when all those teams are good, it kind of lifts the spirit of the whole state up.
For sure. Scary Alvarez said, "Good writer can maybe give Shaka some helpful minutes now. Still playing. Give him some point guard minutes. Back up Tyler Kolek maybe."
Hey, Shaka was on the court in that Creighton game, and he got a lot of heat for that. But
That
sliding
was funny. I never watched
fans.
that.
I thought that was great. My own father was like, "This is ridiculous. Like he should get teed up." Um, but I think that's part of what we're talking about here is just you have somebody that is that passionate about what's going on. Who doesn't want to play for a guy like that?
Yeah, for sure. Barry asked if in your thoughts you think Fox needs to fire Jimmy Johnson after his halftime burst out.
God,
We'll come back to that question on Friday night too.
he got a lot of heat for that, didn't he?
Yeah,
In some ways, I don't blame him because he won Super Bowls. He was the Dallas
yeah.
coach. It's
He's
like,
a Cowboy guy.
come on, what do you expect him to do? Is talk a bunch of pro Green Bay? But it was
Mhm.
interesting at the halftime of that game how little just airtime went to the Packers at all.
Yeah.
But
I get that it's like, oh, Dallas is favored and they have all the stars and all the all pros, but like, I don't know, give a little credit. Shout out to the underdogs.
yeah, some ways I kind of like that. I feel like it's kind of been the persona of that team of just
Hmm.
you don't want to talk about us, write about us. It's fine. We'll just go out and win the game, and now you kind of have the ultimate test on Saturday against the Niners.
Yeah. Scary said, no mistake, Shaka is a good one and easy to root for. Absolutely. I think Jake and I have actually talked about that on some of the Wednesday shows, that Shaka Smart is a guy that we want to play for, or seems like the guy you want to play for.
I think Shaka is just a good guy. I think you talk to even recruits that don't go to Marquette that talk about their visits there and watching practice, and everything they say is authentic. Like,
Mm.
what you see is kind of what you get. And there was a kid that didn't go to Marquette that almost talked about how, like, the practices were too intense. Like, he's sitting in a folding chair on the side and some kid, like, dove and kind of knocked him back in a folding chair. And I thought, I mean, what a great story, because it's like, that's the way it's done there. And if you don't want to be a part of that, then Shaka probably said, hey, good luck.
Wild. Scary said Dallas might have had a better chance with Johnson coaching. Maybe. So I thought it was really interesting. What are some of the important lessons you learned from Rick Majerus, and do you still have some of the game notes from him?
Yeah. So for those listening, I had the opportunity to work for Rick Majerus for a year while I was at Marquette, and I was actually working for a sports agent. And Rick came into the office one day. So this agent was helping Rick with some TV stuff for ESPN, and he said, "I need an assistant." And my boss kind of looked at me and was like, "Hire John. He'll help you." And at first he's like, "Oh, I want it to be female," and uh, yeah, my boss was like, "Well, you think about it, whatever." And he came the next day and said, "Yeah, fine, we'll work together." And yeah, we basically spent the summer together, helping him move out of the Pfister Hotel into a condo on the east side, and um, so many stories with him. I mean, I think one of my favorites and one that I wrote about in the book was just, he called me one day and said, "I need you to go pick something up for me." And this was after weeks of, I'm dealing with these health issues and you got to remind me to eat healthier. And my doctor wants me to drink so much water a day, all that. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. What do you want me to pick up? And so he texts me this thing to go to Usinger Sausage Company, pick up 89 pounds of bratwurst. And of course, I'm just like, is this for you? Or he's like, no, it's for some party we're having. And of course, me being his assistant or whatever, there was no parties, there was no event coming up. I knew it was going straight into his freezer in the garage. So yeah, he was one of a kind.
Okay, speaking of one of a kind, I really want you to be able to tell your Aaron Rodgers story.
Yeah, so back in 2010, I was living in Park City, Utah, and every year they have this famous Sundance Film Festival, and a bunch of celebrities come for the week. And it's this tiny mountain town, lots of big parties that you can't get into. And me and some buddies went downtown one night. I think it was Saturday night, and we walk into this Irish pub called Oh Shucks. And they only serve like 40-ounce schooners of beer. So it's just, you go in there, that's what you get. And so we walked to the back of this bar. We're trying to find a place to sit down. Ironically, this guy I was with was from Green Bay. And lo and behold, we look to the left and there's this big round booth, and Aaron Rodgers is sitting in the booth with like 5 other guys. And we're like, we don't want to bother him. Of course, he's probably like sitting back here to, avoid people coming up to him. But we just walked up to him because that was, I think, a week after they had lost to the Cardinals in that overtime shootout back in 2010. So we went up, just said, "Hey, some of those throws at the end of the game were insane. Big Packer fans, have a good time in Utah." And he actually gets out of the booth and he comes and starts talking to us, and we take a couple pictures together. And then he actually says, "You want to play with me in Buck Hunter, the video game?" And so, sure, let's play. So we played Buck Hunter. I beat him badly. And he eventually is like, "Well, I got to go. It's good chatting with you guys." And he leaves the bar. And then about 10 minutes later, a waitress comes up to us with this huge tray full of pitchers of beer and just sets them down. And we said, "We didn't order these. That's got to be for somebody else." She's like, "No, that guy in the suit jacket that just walked out, he ordered you guys like 10 pitchers of beer." And so that's my Aaron Rodgers story. We always thought that was a pretty legendary thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, having on your resume that you beat Aaron Rodgers and Buck Hunter, that's got to be pretty sweet to have on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a few more drinks, before than I did when we started that game, but the fact that he wanted to play me was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So this was after you were at Marquette, but what was it like interning with the Bucks? I mean, what are some of your impressions of guys, maybe the 13th, 14th, 15th guy on the end of the bench, and what people like to think they could do against a player like that?
Yeah, well, everybody on an NBA roster is an amazing basketball player, and I think that, the level of talent with those probably 11 through 15 guys is it's ridiculous. A lot of teams will play the guys that are getting paid, and the coaches are instructed to do that. How
Mhm,
much better are they than the guy in the 12th spot on the bench? Maybe a little bit, but I mean, you see that on nights sometimes when starters rest. Some of these NBA games are still really, really close with
mhm.
guys that you never heard of because they're still really good players. Um, and so when I wrote my second book about Travis Diener, one of the things that just kind of shocked me as I wrote the book and talked to him and was that Travis actually had an opportunity to come home to Milwaukee and sign a contract to be the Bucks' third point guard.
Hmm.
And they offered him several $1,000,000 to do so. And that would have been his fifth or sixth year in the NBA. And instead, he said, I'm 28 years old. I actually want to play meaningful minutes and I want to like lead a team and I want to like be out on the court. And so he went and signed a contract in Sardinia in the Italian league and he went to Italy for a huge pay cut. Um, but he played and he started and he kind of became a legend over there. And it was kind of just an amazing, I don't know, metaphor with life sometimes of just like what's
Mhm.
important to you. Um, because, you know, his dad thought he was nuts. Like, you got several $1,000,000, you could come home to Wisconsin and play basketball in the NBA. Um, and he wanted to play, so he moved to Italy.
Wow. Um, Scary asked if you have Roger's email address. Barry asked if you have any funny Greek freak stories. I'm not sure how long you were in Milwaukee interning there, but anything from your internship with the Bucks that really like stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a marathon NBA season. So you go to practices, you go to any basketball related stuff, and it's pretty low intensity. It's just so different than college. You know, we used to joke like when I played at Marquette, we played Arizona in Milwaukee, and Arizona was a top 10 team, and we lost by like
Oh,
a
credit card
couple
number.
points. And I remember before that because it was a Saturday game at like noon. So we were doing our shoot around at 7 or 8 in the morning and we're getting ready to go out on the court. And Arizona had actually warmed up first. So at like 6 or 7. And Lute Olson comes over to me and was just like, this is way too early to be doing this. Um, but his shoot arounds were so relaxed, no yelling, no whistles. And we were going through like a full practice with Coach Crean. And so, being with the Bucks, it was so much different. Where again, everything was very relaxed. No one wants to get hurt. But of course, you're playing 82 games. Like, how many times can you go balls to wall and shoot arounds,
Mhm.
and practices and stuff? You just can't.
The guy that I like to bring up, or I shouldn't even say that I like to bring up, the fans like to bring up is Thanasis. And it's like just watching some of the things that he does when he does get into games, it's like there's no shot. That guy would beat you 21-0 and you would never get a shot off.
Yeah, I mean, he brings some incredible energy. I'm sure a lot of the guys in the league hate that. Um, I forget. I was watching the end of the game the other night. Where he had a couple nice moves to the basket, a couple block shots.
Hmm.
He also,
That was the end of the Warriors game, I think.
yeah,
Or
picked
no,
up a couple
that was the end of the Celtics game. That was the
Celtics
Celtics
game.
game on Thursday night. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I guess if you're sitting and riding the pine most of the time, what do you expect? You get in the game, you're gonna, put some effort into it.
Yeah, and people are just, oh, he's only on the team because he's Giannis's brother, and then he comes in and it's like, nah, the way that guy, like his athleticism, nah, the dude that you think from your local Y that would beat him in a basketball game, nah, Thanasis is gonna beat him 21-0.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. One guy that So this just goes to show how long ago I was with the Bucks. But Earl Boykins
Oh yeah.
was 5'5" on a good day, and I mean Earl Boykins could dunk a basketball. He would hit crazy, just easy looking shots over 7-footers all the time, and you're just like, how did that go in? Um, he was an amazing basketball player. Yeah, and just being around a guy like that was, one of those things where it's like, geez, I'm 6'1", and I can't score against some of these big guys, and he just makes it look easy. So it goes to show just the level of some of those players.
Scary asked, what's your prediction for how the Badgers hoop finish in the Big Ten and the NCAA?
I think Wisconsin has just as good a chance of anybody to win the Big Ten. And so I could easily see them getting probably a 3 or 4 seed in the tournament. And I think I just there's some games where Wisconsin plays Marquette every year. I feel like they play out of their minds. Um, and there's other games, where they struggle from the field and their perimeter shooting isn't as good. But AJ Storr has been great. They've got some good depth. They've got some good players.
So back into a different kind of question, what do you think is the importance of character? And then how do you think fans kind of factor into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and I think I'll use the Packers as an example. I feel like they've been one of those franchises that's done an amazing job at a lot of their players don't get in trouble.
Mm.
And there's so many teams where they sign so many guys that are constantly, having problems off the field. And I feel like there's just certain organizations where that never seems to happen. Um, and so I think it speaks to the leadership of the team. Speaks to like the captains on the team.
Mm.
There's certain teams where you have a senior leader where it's like, this is the way things are done here. And everybody just kind of follows in line. And then eventually those guys are seniors and it just like starts over. And those are typically the programs that have some longevity because it's just a constant stream of, leader, follower. And those guys take a lot of pride in that. So I think that's a huge, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone has to get talented players. But, Marquette in particular, Shaka's a big believer in relationships. And I think,
Mm.
they tend to market that well. But every program has some instance of that, of just you got to have guys that get along with each other, respectfully push each other, but that kind of hold the standards of the program up.
And then this is a tough thing because as we at Wisco Fanatics are really trying to relate this to fandom in a more positive way. And I'm not saying that we should tell people how to be fans, but just the character of fans. Is there anything that really like stands out to you and makes you think about like this is what a player is thinking about as far as the fans are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. So I was a freshman in college playing Division II basketball in Minnesota. Went on the road. I won't name the college, but a Division II school in Nebraska. And there were some fans in like the front section, kind of by our bench, that were just like in my ear the whole game. They knew my family members' names. They knew my sister's name. They knew like where she lived. And it's like, that's the type of stuff where it's funny at the beginning, but it kind of just takes it a step too far. So that's
I,
like in person, I think that's one aspect if you're actually attending a game. But as a player, it's like, well, what are you supposed to do about that? So there's that side of it. And I think the second part is just, you know, I've had plenty of times in my life where like the Packers would lose and your whole Sunday's wrecked,
mm-hmm.
wife or kids, and you're like, oh, the older you get, the more it's like, hey, my happiness and the ability to be around me can't be dependent on the score of the Green Bay game. So now I look at it different of, hey, it's a fun thing for me. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it, win or lose. And I'm just appreciative to, have the opportunity to watch that, or my wife watches the kids while I watch it. I can't be mad at her for the game if the Packers lose. So definitely part of just getting older and maturing a little bit.
A good answer. Barry asked, "What's your favorite game of your career?"
My favorite game of my career was when Marquette beat Wisconsin in 2000 4. The Badgers were heavily favored. Alonzo Tucker, Brian Butch was a friend of mine, and there was actually a scuffle that broke out around the free throw line that me and another guy left the bench. Bunch of words exchanged. Crean got into it with Bo Ryan, and we somehow beat them, even though they were heavily favored. So I think if you're a Wisconsin kid playing in that game is probably the game you circle, even versus maybe a Big Ten or Big East opponent.
It's tough because we have 2 guys that do our Badgers shows with us. Jake is my co-host, and then Mike joins us for Badger content. They're both like just Badger guys. But me, like, I grew up as a fan of both Marquette and Wisconsin. So I'm such an internal struggle of like, which one do I cheer for? So I end up cheering for neither, and just like whichever one wins, like, I'm happy for. It's a struggle.
There's a lot of people on Twitter, especially where I feel like, yeah, you can't be both. I'll still root for Wisconsin, if they're not playing Marquette.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with football, but there's definitely a lot of Marquette fan base that hates Wisconsin for whatever reason, and that's fine. I mean, everyone can have their opinion. But yeah, I'm probably not that in that camp.
It's weird. I grew up as a fan of both, so it's very internally conflicting. But so tying back into the character aspect, how do you react to losing? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but just kind of relating it from player to fan to then just a life in general, reacting to losing and trying to harness it in a useful, productive way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the older you get, the more it's maybe easier to kind of internalize that, when you're younger and you're just immature, it's really easy just to be a hothead and kind of let that get to you or, wreck the rest of your day. But I think even when you're playing high level sports like that, I mean, you watch a lot of tape, you look at all the things that went wrong, you talk about things you did, your team did, maybe they did that you didn't expect. And then eventually you have to put those learnings, I guess, like onto the practice floor the next week and get ready for the next game. But I think one of the worst things is sometimes people take that stuff. It's like it gets you so down. The good teams find ways to pick themselves back up. And, Marquette just had a slew of injuries and it's had a
Mm-hmm.
couple bad games. I think the Twitterverse is like the sky's falling. And my reaction is kind of the opposite of sure they got some issues, but so is everybody else. And yeah, that's the point where you kind of got to hold hands and just say, we're in this together. We support each other. And, you know, that'll help you get the most, whether it's, whether you win all your games or not, I think is a sidebar to, you play the best basketball you can play and just the chips kind of fall where they may.
So this is tying more to moving on to coaching, but what is an aspect of coaching that you feel relates well to life?
All of it. I think, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you work for somebody, you play for somebody, you're going to have teammates, you're going to have coworkers. I think your ability to get along with people is the same in either way. I don't think like as a person that manages people, I can't say a lot of things that I might say as a coach to a team. So there's a line there. Um, but man, I love coaching, especially like younger kids. I coached a freshman boys basketball team several years ago. It's one of the great just years of my life because at that point, you could talk through everything these kids are going through. Um, and even on the basketball court, it was like, do you not have the ability to do this, or do you just not understand, or you just not want to? And we would kind of figure those things out. And a lot of times it was like, you're just not skilled enough to do this. So let's fix it and let's work on it. And we got better. And some kids were like, screw this, I don't want to do it. Well, you don't play. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of similarities there, but same thing we just talked about in terms of adversity. And sports
Mm.
is the ultimate just predicator for kind of getting kicked in the mouth or having a bad boss or, dealing with bad coworkers. It happens to all of us. It's going to probably happen the rest of our lives. And ultimately, you have to be able to kind of just navigate that stuff mentally so it doesn't, leave you in a bad mood all day. Because so many people kind of get into that funk and it's no way to live.
And that's a perfect tie-in to the last question that I want to ask. We asked this of all the guests that we have on the show. How do you take care of your mental health?
So it's funny because my whole life, like I still love to play basketball. Um,
Mhm.
I run a lot, got a treadmill in my basement. And I feel like even if, I've got young kids, so even if I can get down there for like 20 minutes, it's like it just like resyncs my mind a little bit. So if my kids are screaming and they're doing things, and my wife's like, why are they doing this? And it's like they're 3 and they're 5, who knows? Um, I love getting away just to do something physically like that. And the second thing is I read a lot. And I feel
Mm.
like oftentimes you read a good book, just puts your head in a different space, takes you out of kind of your own thoughts and feelings. And whether you learn something or it just like sets your perspective, I think that's super important because, man, so many times it's easy to feel bad about your circumstances. And it's like, come on, man, like there's so many things that could be way worse. And sometimes we just need that reminder.
Yeah, I love that. That's something I've aspired to, especially the last year or so, is trying to read more and obviously listening to books, which is how I ended up hearing about you and listening to your book, which I really enjoyed. Like I said, I didn't want it to end when it was like, and then I was starting to coach another team, and I'm like, oh, I didn't want the book to end. But I appreciate you hopping on with me for a little while, and I would love to keep in touch. And then other than that, thanks everybody for commenting along and asking some good questions. And Jake and I will see you guys on Wednesday.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Tyler.